Welcome, everyone. I think we'll wait maybe one more minute to get started, but there are quite a few people already in. Yeah, we'll just give it one more minute just to make sure everybody's able to get in, and then we'll get into it. Okay, May, how are you feeling about getting started? Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone to a Heartwood Healing Centre webinar. Just a quick disclosure before May gets started, that the Q&A portion is open and it is set so that you should be able to choose to be anonymous. With that said, even if you do not select that option, when I read the questions out, I will not mention your name, so you do not have to be concerned about that showing up. As we will be posting the recording of this webinar on our website after, so if you need to leave, don't worry about missing out on anything. I guess I should also introduce myself. I'm Michaela. I am the Engagement and Service Coordinator here at Heartwood. I've probably met with many of you doing engagement sessions. And with that said, I will pass it off to May to get us started.
Thanks, Michaela. Yeah, I'm May, and I'm a white settler on this territory. My ancestors come from Eastern Europe and have also occupied colonized lands in South America, as well as Canada. And I'm really grateful to be on the land that I get to live on and work on as an uninvited guest. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. It'll take me just 1 second to set up PowerPoint, get it started. Oh, this is being all very funny for me now. Give me just 1 sec. There we go. Okay, so today we're talking about what to expect from therapy. Oh, also I'm a clinical team leading therapist here at Heartwood Healing Centre. That might be important to know. So I'm in the long-term therapy program for the most part. I do sort of take on short-term clients as necessary when people sort of need it. So I'm a little bit flexible, but mostly I'm in the long-term program. And okay, is this going to let me change slides? Yes, okay, that's good to know. So I'll start with a land honoring. And so Heartwood Healing Centre offices and myself are on the original traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Inanu, Oceti, Sakowin, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. And I just want to add on to this that we're talking about what to expect in therapy today. And for a long time, the knowledge that was honored in this space and upheld in this space was that of colonizers and people who did not value other ways of knowing. And I feel really grateful to live in a time where Indigenous peoples are now sharing their knowledge with us that they've had for time immemorial, and that we can continue to benefit from this and work together and honor many types of knowledge in this space. And also honor that there are still people being harmed in therapy, and that some people, what they can expect from therapy is not the best care. And that I personally aim, and Heartwood Healing Centre aims to provide the best care that we can. Okay, so actually what to expect from therapy is a huge topic, and I'm going to do my best to cover as much as I can, even though this could probably be a several-hour webinar. we don't have time for that today. And I'm also going to do my best to speak slowly and to stay every single thing on the slides. So if you're just a more verbal processy person, I'm going to do my best to do that. I'm also going to do my best to remember to describe the pictures on every slide. Most of them don't have anything to do with what's on the slide. So if I forget, it's not going to be a big deal, but I'm going to do my best to do that. So our outline today, we're going to cover what is therapy, what different types of therapy exist, what type of therapy does Heartwood offer, and what type of counseling services, what can you expect from a short-term counseling, what can you expect from long-term therapy, what factors can impact your experience of counseling or therapy, your hopes for therapy and how that might impact your experience, what to expect when therapy or counseling ends, and then questions to ask yourself and questions to ask your therapist, and other things that you might want to keep in mind. And just a note before I get into what is therapy is that I use therapy or counseling interchangeably. Apparently, there's a difference. It makes no difference to me specifically. And sort of how I talk about it is like there's long-term therapy and short-term counseling. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to use them interchangeably for this webinar. So I was trying to find a definition of therapy on the internet, and I couldn't find anything that sort of aligned the best way that I felt like it could for Heartwood Healing Centre. So I just kind of made up a definition that fit in my mind. And so therapy or counseling is an activity where an individual or people in relationship with each other, and that might be a romantic relationship, a familial relationship, or a platonic relationship, meet with a qualified counselor or therapist to expand on the good in their lives or to address challenges. And people come to therapy for many different reasons. And so maybe it's like working through a really specific thing in your relationship. Maybe you've been diagnosed with a mental or physical health condition that you need some support for. There's all sorts of different reasons that people come to therapy. Maybe it's just working through patterns, like you're noticing a pattern in your friendships. Maybe you're noticing that there's stuff in your family that you really want to work through. And I also like to note at this point that therapy is not like going to the doctor. So what I mean by that is that sometimes when we go to the doctor, maybe oftentimes, we go to the doctor, we have our 10 minutes, we're like, hey doc, I got this issue. And maybe you walk with a prescription or maybe some tests or trying to sort of figure something out, but usually you kind of walk away with something, hopefully. Therapy may not feel like that. Maybe sometimes it does. Maybe you have a psychiatrist who also does therapy and you sort of walk away with these different tips or things to try. And maybe sometimes therapy feels like that, but it can also feel like, just like talking through something or just, I don't know, like you're sort of like trying to mold clay. And yes, it's something different. It feels like work, but it might not feel like I got something that's going to change my life today. And it's not to say it's not building towards something. It's just sort of changing how you might think of it. And so there are tons of different types of therapy in the world. I have not listed even like a tiny bit of them here. So just to be aware that there are many, 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 many different types of therapies out there. And some that you might have heard of before, big ones are CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, internal family systems, EMDR, so eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, relational therapy, psychodynamic therapies, feminist therapies, brain spotting, cognitive processing therapy, and AEDP, which I believe I always get this acronym wrong, accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy. And so this is just a really, really short list of some things that you might have heard of and some things that therapists here at Heartwood do. And so just to be aware that there's all sorts of different things. And maybe you've even like done some of these in different types of therapies that you've been in. And a really also big important note is that not all types of therapy are going to work for every single person. I am not a believer in like, this is the one thing I do and this is what should work for everyone. I think everyone is really different. And just like oftentimes people have to try different medications to find the one that works for their body, you have to try different types of therapy to find the one that works for you. And maybe what you think is really going to work, maybe just kind of doesn't work, and you shift gears, or maybe something that worked for you in the past just like isn't what you need right now. And so all these things are always changing. We're really, really complex beings, and so there's never a one size fits all solution. And so just a really, really brief overview of just our counseling services. Of course, we have other services, like many other services other than just these. But just to cover the counseling services we offer, I'll go over them in a little more detail, but we have short-term counseling, parenting counseling sessions, and long-term therapy. And so short-term counseling, what that looks like is it's up to 12 sessions, over a max of 6 months. So it could be weekly or biweekly. It's meant to be present focused. And just a note that students help us offer this service. And so, Michaela, if you have an engagement session with her, she'll ask you if you're okay working with a student. You can say yes or no, doesn't matter. Yeah. And parenting counseling sessions, they're very similar to short-term counseling in their structure. So they're up to 12 sessions over 6 months. And they're meant to be focused on the challenges of parenting, but of course, other things might come up and that might look kind of similar to short-term counseling, and other stuff might come in. And at times, students also help us offer to that service as well. And then long-term therapy. So we offer up to 2 years or 60 sessions for a person, whatever comes first. Students do not help us with this service because they're usually only with us for about a year or 8 months, so that just wouldn't work for that. And the idea is to have more time and space to explore past trauma, if that's what you're interested in. But obviously topics other than trauma may become more important sometimes. And, it's not always a space, it doesn't always make sense to only focus on sexual abuse, even though that's our mandate and what people come to us for. Other things might come in because, like I said before, we're complex beings. That isn't the only thing that our lives are about and centered on. Sometimes it might be, but other times it might not be. And just to note that all of our services, or our counseling services, I should say, are available in person, via video, and via phone. Okay, and so what types of therapy does Heartwood offer? And on the right, there's a picture of a table with a whole bunch of rocks on it. And so our therapists come from many different fields and life experiences that have led them to this work of therapy here at Heartwood. And we have a whole bunch of different backgrounds of people, and so I've just listed some here. They've been trained in a variety of disciplines. And so we have some people trained in marriage and family therapy. We have people trained in counseling psychology. We have people trained from an education background or educational psychology. Social work, I'm a social worker. And drama therapy. And there's even more than that. I'm just going to put them all on the slide. And therapists, sort of once their formal education is done, maybe like a university setting, you can also choose to do other trainings beyond that in different therapeutic modalities. And you might be sort of certified in something, or you might just have like a little bit of information about something. As well, we tend to read a lot of books. I've always got a book on my desk that I'm slowly sort of sifting through. And so some therapists, again, this is a short list of all the things that we're all trained in, but some therapists are trained in narrative therapy, EMDR, like I talked about before, that's eye movement desensitization reprocessing, DBT or DBT skills, and that's dialectical behavior therapy, somatic experiencing, feminist therapy, and lots more. There's so much under the sun in general, and there's so much under the Heartwood umbrella. So hopefully there's something for everyone. And I just want to sort of interject here, because a lot of people come into therapy that I've noticed are really worried that I'm going to ask about like specific memories. We're going to jump in right away. We're going to have to talk about really horrible things all the time. And sort of think of the picture on the left, which is what appears to be like a masculine person sort of clenching their fists with a tie and a shirt. And ideally, we're not white knuckling anything. And the picture on the right, what trauma therapy actually might look like is someone who two feminine presenting people looking at each other. One of them is clearly listening to the other one, and that is kind of how it goes. I I don't think anyone is ever going to force you here at Heartwood to talk about things you don't want to talk about. You certainly don't even have to go into specific memories if you don't want to, or specific experiences. And I usually say, like, it's really important and valid what happened, and the details of it don't necessarily matter. I don't need to know the details to know how this impacted you in your life. And hopefully, like sometimes I think it can always feel challenging, but hopefully it doesn't feel like white knuckling it and just like pushing through something for the sake of pushing through. That's not the idea. And so I just wanted to have a very important note at this stage that it doesn't need to look like that. And if it's starting to feel like that, please let us know. I really like all of us would really want to hear what you're feeling and if it's going well and how things need to be different for you. Okay, so getting into some of the meat of this. And so, what to expect from short term counseling. And the picture on the right is a picture from our other building of a fire we had during our client appreciation event. It was very cozy and cute to have the fire. And okay, so I'll also note that what you can expect from short-term counseling is also probably pretty similar to what you can expect from long-term therapy and vice versa as well. I tried to sort of separate them, but it all bleeds into each other. So you can probably use this for long-term as well. So you're an expert in your own experiences. I'm never going to know what your life looks like better than you do. And so um, I try not to offer advice, but put that sort of back onto you and what you think. And like, hopefully, we can co create something with both of our knowledges. And that goes back to that sort of two-way street that I was talking about before. And I noted in sort of our list of counseling services that it's present focused. And here that I put present focused, but that's not to say that different memories or things from the past don't come in. And that's totally okay. What we need to keep in mind and what your therapist will probably ask you about is like, okay, cool, we're going down this path, we're getting a little bit deeper. Do you feel like we have the time and space to sufficiently explore these things and then sort of put them back together in the time that we have? And sometimes it feels like yes, and sometimes it might feel like no, especially in short term when you only have 12 sessions. And I sort of liken it to deep sea diving or like scuba diving. There might be a difference, I don't know it. Where maybe you're going into the water, but maybe you don't have enough oxygen to actually keep you down there for very long. And so we need to be aware of that and just know like, okay, so we can only go this deep today or in general before we run out of oxygen, have to come back up. And all that's totally fine and valid. The important thing is keeping you safe. And again, having you feel like you're not white knuckling it and hopefully getting something out of this. And it can also be emotionally draining and or slightly awkward, especially at the beginning. It might feel a little bit awkward because you're meeting a stranger who you're ostensibly going to be talking about really hard things with. And that's totally fine. Of course, it's going to be a little bit awkward. Or if it doesn't feel awkward, that's fine too. But know that that's totally fine to be expected when you're starting a new therapeutic relationship. And yeah, it might feel emotionally draining throughout. Again, this is for short term and long term. You might be holding a whole bunch of stuff you might have been holding a whole bunch of stuff for a really long time. And all of a sudden you're sort of putting it down. It's like holding, I don't know. I see firewood here, so I'm thinking of bags of firewood, but it could be anything. You have bags of bricks around and you all of a sudden put it down. It's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I actually am like really exhausted from carrying all of that. So it can feel emotionally draining. Hopefully it doesn't feel totally horrible near the end of your sessions, but for sure it can feel draining. Um, and another misconception that I think people have because of TV and movies and stuff like that is that you may not have like a big breakthrough moment. Hopefully, you get things from every single session. Like maybe you learn more about yourself or about your family dynamic or your relationships or how different things have impacted your life. Hopefully, that's always happening, but it may not come in the form of like a lightning bolt moment where you just realize something about yourself or something where it just changes your entire life in a moment. This is really like hard work, and it takes time and effort to shift things in your life. And so yeah, it might just not feel like a lightning bolt, but you might have also experiences where it's like, oh, like a light clicks on, and like, oh, I just like I fully like understand this in a new way that I just didn't before. And that's totally cool, and that can feel like a breakthrough. Um, but it might just not change everything in your life immediately by having that. And I also sort of like had this little idea of some questions your counselor might ask. So it might be, I mean, there's like so many questions that could possibly be asked, and so many questions that I've personally asked. But especially at the beginning, I usually ask, what brings you to counseling now? What would you like to get out of therapy? Is there anything you want to know about me? Has there been anything that's worked for you in the past? Is there anything you're specifically interested in? Um, so all sorts of different questions, or like, how do you cope? With your experiences? What supports do you have in your life? What's going well in your life? There's all sorts of different questions we might ask um, that are generally pretty standard and just serve to get to know you a little bit better, hopefully. And moving on to what to expect from long-term therapy. Again, I'm being struck with the feeling. So this is just such a big topic, and I can't possibly imagine how to cover it all. But I'm going to try. And on the right is a picture of our group room here at Roslyn. You can see or you might not be able to see, but there's some black chairs with arms, as well as a love seat and a larger seat there. I'm not sure what to call that, but a larger sort of couchy seat, as well as a quilt on the wall of a tree and our little logo on the corner. And some things that you can expect from long-term therapy. As I said before, it gives us a little more time and space to explore the impacts of CSA or child sexual abuse in greater depth. And so there's a little more, like we have more oxygen in the tank. If we want to go deep, we have more oxygen to be able to go to a greater depth and then come back up and end in a good way, hopefully. And we also have time and space to build sort of that two-way relationship where hopefully it feels safe and open to bring your full self and your experiences to that space. And there is no right way. Also, I think it's very funny. Like I'm on this side of things, people sometimes get hung up on like, well, I'm not talking about like my sexual abuse enough. I should be doing this. I should be talking about that. And I'm not getting to that. That is totally fine. That is a-okay. Sometimes other things come up. Therapy does not look the same for every person. Again, being on this side of things, it really looks super different. And everyone has different needs. Of course, like I said before, there's just no single way of doing it. We are very complicated beings with complicated lives. And as well as like on that note, some people are worried that sometimes they're getting too sort of maybe present focused and not talking about the past in the way that they maybe should, whatever that means. But even if we're like maybe talking about a present issue, I always say there's a thread to the past. So even though maybe we're talking about you have a really challenging relationship with your mom right now, that still has threads to the past. Or if we're talking about like, oh wow, I'm having a lot of difficulty in my romantic relationship, everything sort of has links to the past. And even if we're not directly looking at the past, there's always some healing going on. And like I said before, it's a two-way street. Very much so. I do my best to bring like my authentic self to the room and hope that creates a safe, open space for people to talk about whatever they need to talk about and know that I'm not being judgmental. I can't speak for other people. Maybe I can. I think we're all pretty non-judgmental here. And hopefully have like lots of opportunities to learn. Like a lot of therapy, I think, is learning about yourself and just learning things that none of us get to learn, unfortunately, in school or society. Like we're not talking about how trauma might impact your nervous system or how your nervous system sort of works in general, or learn about your relationships or learn about your emotions or learn about how your thoughts might impact all of those things and how maybe oppression impacts all of that on top of things. So there's lots of opportunities to learn, and I always say like sort of contextualize your experience. And you can also expect, you know, your therapist to normalize, validate, and challenge you. So normalize, again, like being on this side of things. I hear a lot of people sort of maybe being hard on themselves for their experiences or things that they do that they maybe feel ashamed about or they just wish could be different in some way. And from this side of things, I know that lots of people often feel like that or do the same thing. And so part of my job is to say, you know, yes, that is absolutely a normal thing to do in the context of really abnormal circumstances. And of course, we can problematize the sort of lexicon of normal versus abnormal. Um, but since it's sort of normalizing, I'll use that language. But lots of things are normal in the context of what people have experienced. So a common one, just like an example that I hear is having trouble like showering or bathing. And people have a lot of shame about that. And I think they're the only one who experiences that. And I can tell every single person watching, if you struggle with that, many, 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 many people struggle with that. And again, it makes total sense that that's hard. And validation. So yeah, it makes sense why you're feeling that way. There's a lot of hopefully understanding in the therapy space, wherever that is for you, if it's at Heartwood or otherwise, where things sort of make sense. And you can also expect your therapist to challenge you. Um, so part of therapy is like growing and like twisting, like that sort of piece of clay I was talking about before. Maybe it starts off as a cube and then it ends up as a vase eventually. And you can't get there without doing some sort of manipulation of that clay. Manipulation is maybe not the right word, but sort of playing with the clay a little bit. And so, and challenging might not be, I mean, it's not getting into a fight or anything, but it might look like, hey, like, have you ever thought of this? Like, is this maybe the other side of that? Maybe this person was feeling like this. Is that a possibility? Or is it possible we just don't have the information to extrapolate from this situation? So you can also expect to be a little bit challenged from your therapist. And also, especially in long-term therapy, but I think in short-term as well, this can happen, but especially in long-term when it's been like 2 years or quite a few sessions, you can also expect to feel like kind of close to your therapist. You know, it's actually like a pretty emotionally intimate relationship at times, like maybe not every time, but at times. And that can feel really vulnerable to some people, which is all totally fine, and that makes total sense. Or it can feel empowering, or it can feel like a source of strength, or it can, yeah, it can feel funny too, and that's okay. And if it feels like, if anything feels just kind of weird, or you just like don't really know, let us know. My number one goal is to like have you get what you want out of therapy and need out of therapy. And if I just don't know how you're feeling, then I can't do that much about it. So please always tell your therapist if you feel okay about it. If you need something to be different, or if things just feel, if you just like have questions or ideas. Okay. So what factors can impact your experience of counseling? There's a whole bunch of things. And this is again not an exhaustive list, but things like, do you feel ready? And you know, I think a lot of people sort of come to therapy maybe feeling like, okay, this is what I have to do, this is what I need to do to get better. And like maybe that's the case. And maybe it's also like kind of a bad time. Like maybe if you're in the middle of a big move or there's just like a lot going on, you're like, maybe that's actually not the best time for therapy. And that's totally fine. And you also don't have to feel totally ready, but it's also okay to come to the place of like, I've had a few sessions and I actually just don't feel ready right now. And do you know what you want out of therapy? Again, you don't have to know, I exactly want to get to this place in therapy, but do you have like sort of an idea of what you might want to work on? Do you want to work on your relationship with your family? Do you want to work on sort of your relationship with yourself and how you talk to yourself and how you treat yourself? There's all sorts of things you can want out of therapy, and all of them are totally cool and awesome. And it's just helpful to maybe think about that. The fit of you and your therapist. Obviously, I mean, not everyone is friends all the time, and you and your therapist, it might just not be a good fit, and that's not anyone's fault. It just might not be quite the right fit for you. How you meet with your therapist. So what I mean by that is like coming in person might feel different than like maybe talking on the phone. And because there's just so much visual information that we get from each other, and information from our nervous system that I think is lost maybe over the phone or virtually, that might impact it too. Or maybe it's a really good fit if you're doing things over the phone for certain things, but it can just impact it, or maybe it won't. If you experience trauma regularly. So I include this to say things like, I mean, often we are experiencing trauma, especially if you live with marginalized identities or intersections of marginalized identities. But also if you're experiencing something like an abusive relationship of some kind. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And when you're going through therapy, also depends on maybe your supports. If you have some supports around you who are really supportive of therapy and like totally down to do what you're practicing in therapy, what you're learning in therapy, that can be helpful. Not to say if you don't have those supports, that is not going to be helpful. Um, because we're in a post, hopefully, COVID world, or at least the quarantine parts of COVID, big disruptive events like COVID can really impact your experience of counseling. Um, I know from this side, it certainly affected me. I know it affected people I work with. Hopefully that's not on the horizon again, but who knows? But know that that will probably impact your therapy, especially if we have to suddenly go all remote again. Although luckily we have the ability to do that pretty quickly, and we're all like prepared for that scenario now, in a way that I think a lot of like places in general weren't in the past. Okay, and so how hopes for therapy might impact your experience of therapy. On the right, there's a picture of our waiting room here at Roslyn. And you can see there's some cupboards, there's baskets of snacks and pins, a bunch of brochures, there's some mugs, we offer coffee, there's a clock, and there's a big bulletin board with different community um, events and services for people to look at while they're waiting. And so your hopes for therapy can be anything, really. Your therapy is about you, and like you're the boss in that situation. You can have whatever hopes you want. If part of your hopes are you want to learn German, that's cool. I really want that for you. I can actually not teach you how to learn German, but if you really want to do that as part of it, go for it. You set that goal for yourself. And you might have sort of specific hopes, like maybe it's um, you really want to let go of like a certain behavior that you do, whatever that is. So that can be like more specific, or you can have broader hopes. So maybe that's, you just want to be able to trust the people in your life who deserve your trust more. So it doesn't have to be like those SMART goals all the time, like specific, measurable, whatever the other letters are, time sensitive, I think is in there somewhere. Um, but just like having an idea of where you want to go is often really helpful. So some examples of hopes, and again, very, very short list of all the possibilities. Feel present more often, learn to set boundaries, let go of a relationship that's not serving you, have someone witness your story, forgive, and learn to regulate your nervous system and emotions. And what to expect when therapy ends. Again, this could probably be like a whole webinar in and of itself. And the picture on this slide is the one sort of like cute little clip art clip art, it's probably not clip art, but anyway, it's a little cartoon that I got from the internet of how I was sort of conceptualizing how it hopefully feels when therapy ends. And so there's sort of like a figure, ostensibly a human figure, and there's three of them. The first one is sort of crouched down, holding something really heavy on their back and shoulders. The second one is standing up a little bit straighter, and that big, large thing is sort of breaking up and moving upwards. And the third one is standing straight up, and what was once that big heavy thing is now little pieces and a butterfly. And so some things that you can maybe expect when therapy ends is that at least some of your hopes for yourself and therapy have been fulfilled. It may not be every single one, but hopefully some of them have. And important to know is that the seeds of therapy keep growing. And so even if it feels like you didn't get quite to everything, those things sort of keep growing inside of you. And hopefully you've picked up some skills or ideas or learnings that you can take in the future and keep sort of sowing those seeds and building a garden for yourself. And it might feel, I put here in brackets and finished. So sometimes it feels finished. I think a lot of times it maybe doesn't. Um, and that's really unfortunate. We wish we could offer unlimited therapy to everyone all the time. And that's just unfortunately not the situation we're in. And that's okay if it feels unfinished. And you can like let your therapist know that. It may not change sort of your timing in therapy, but sometimes it might just feel good to sort of work through that and figure out like maybe what happens after you're done. And hopefully you got what you needed. Maybe it's not everything you wanted, maybe it's not everything you needed, but hopefully you got something that you needed. And you're also, I should mention on the sort of last point and that point, is that you're always welcome back to Heartwood. So just because we were done your 2 years, you're done your 12 sessions, you can still always come back. It's not sort of a one and done deal, or you might decide you want to go elsewhere, you want to go to a different agency or seek out private therapy, whatever you want, but you can always come back too. And like I think this a little cartoon was alluding to is that I always hope, and I think everyone hopes that the trauma you experience feels smaller. So it often sort of feels like this big thing that's crowding out a big portion of your brain or your life. And hopefully just it feels smaller. Unfortunately, I always say this, I wish I could take all of that and just like take it out of your brain. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind style, if anyone's ever seen that movie. Unfortunately, I can't. I don't have those powers. So you'll know it's there and it happened, but hopefully it's a small part of your life amongst all these other parts of your life too. Or maybe it doesn't become a butterfly, it doesn't become beautiful, like this little cartoon shows, but maybe it becomes a little lighter and you're not carrying such heavy things with you. And we also hope that you treat yourself with kindness. I was actually thinking of this just before this webinar, and I have a quote on my office. I can't show you because it's on the opposite wall. But it's basically about, when you have an injury, like in your knee or your shoulder or something, and it starts to feel sore, that, you often, like, what, maybe I should stretch, maybe I should ice it, maybe I'll take it a little bit easy for a few days, and that feels okay to us. But when it's the same thing about emotional pain or emotional trauma, we often start to beat ourselves up about it and say like, well, we should be over it. Well, it was in the past and all these different things. And so my hope is that you can treat yourself the way that we treat maybe like more physical ailments of like, yeah, you know what, maybe I need to spend some time like with myself or with these people that I love or doing something I enjoy. And sort of treat yourself more gently than we often do. And another thing you might feel when therapy ends is that, excuse me, I didn't put it on the slide, but you might also feel because it's like such an emotionally close relationship you might have with your therapist, you might feel like sad or angry or confused or lost as to what to do next. And that's okay. That again is a really common feeling. And I want to know about it. Everyone wants to know about it. And hopefully we can work through and find the ways that we can sort of stay connected beyond therapy, whether it's like actually connected or just knowing. Like I can speak for myself that I still think of every single person who I've worked with in the past and hope that they're doing well. And that yes, it feels like a loss for us sometimes too. And so all those reactions to ending therapy are totally normal and valid. And some questions to ask yourself, maybe before starting therapy or as you're starting therapy, or before you're thinking of reaching out. Not to discourage anyone from reaching out, always reach out. What do I want out of this? Do I want someone to witness my experience and talk about, in detail what I've been through? What do I expect from my therapist? What do I expect from myself? Why do I want to do counseling or therapy? Why is it important to me, or sorry, what is important to me in this process? What I want my therapist to know. And again, no specific responses needed to like sort of justify going to therapy, but just some things that you might want to think about. And there might be questions that you want to ask your therapist too. And once again, very short list and things that you might not care about at all, and that's totally fine. You ask whatever is important to you. Some ideas that you might want to ask. What are your credentials? What has their experience in counseling been? Like maybe how long have they been doing this type of work? What other experiences have they had in the past? Do they have any trainings that they've taken different therapeutic modalities? So like that DBT or EMDR or somatic experiencing, whatever it is. Or if you have experience of a therapist using a modality with you that's been helpful for you in the past, do they have experience using that modality with that they could use with you? What's their educational background? Are they familiar with a particular situation or issue that's important to you? So maybe it's really important that your therapist knows something about substance use or has worked with people who have been in, I don't know, an abusive relationship or something like that. You can always ask, and you can always and take time to work through whatever answer they have. But again, ask what's important to you. And just some other things to keep in mind. I think I sort of alluded to these things throughout, but that therapy can feel really vulnerable. It can feel hard sometimes. It can feel draining sometimes, and it can also feel like a source of strength. Like hope, like I know that everyone here, therapist is going to be on your side and like batting for you every step of the way. And so hopefully you feel that, and it can feel like some strength when things are really challenging. And like I've said before, if something's not working or you just want to like switch it up, please talk to us. Again, like this is your therapy. You're the boss here. Please tell us if you want something different that we're not doing. I really want to know. And again, like I said before, you can always come back. There might be interruptions in your life that sort of pause things for you. And or you've done therapy for now and then you realize like actually I have some more stuff to work on. You can always come back if there's any situation in which you feel like you need a break or something like that. You can always talk to your therapist. We can figure things out. And so now we're moving on to the question and answer portion of things. On the left is a picture taken at, I believe, Symmetry Farms or Aurora Farms. Actually, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. There's a blue barn. There's some plants. Wish I could be more specific about which plants in the foreground. And there's a fence and there's a horse eating in sort of the middle ground. And so, Michaela, do we have questions?
Doesn't look like it, but if anybody has any questions, feel free. Along the top of your screen, you should see the option to click on a little button that says Q&A, and it'll give you a place to create a post. And like I said, we will read them anonymously, so no shame. ask whatever you feel like you need to ask. That's what May is here for. We want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and confident coming to Heartwood. We'll give it a second and then see what we got. Oh, I see someone has their hand up. If it's a question that you have, there should be an option to type in the Q&A section. Unfortunately, we have to keep the chat off to maintain everyone's anonymity. So May, we have a question that says, how can I help myself feel prepared for when therapy is going to start?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So I think maybe by asking yourself sort of those questions that I went over, like the questions to ask yourself, and you should be able to watch this later, and maybe I can send out my slides. I think that would probably be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know how that works. Well, that's a future problem. The questions to ask yourself of like, what do I want to get out of this? What do I expect from myself? What do I expect from my therapist? Um, yeah, I think those might be good questions to start with. And also knowing, especially your first session, we're not going to dive in really deeply. Like the first session for sure is going to be a lot of paperwork and just getting to know each other. And then like might trickle into some things over time. But it's not going to be like a whole deep dive right away either. Hopefully that answered your question. Feel free to respond and let me know if you have any follow-up questions.
Thanks, May. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A. Also, I will note, I know this can be intimidating, even though it is anonymous. So feel free to reach out to us at any time in whatever way you feel most comfortable, and we will always be available to answer any questions that you may have. Also, if you've already done an engagement session and are on the wait list for either short-term or long-term therapy, you can also reach out at any time and update any of your answers or change what you're looking for because, of course, things are going to evolve as life happens. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in.
Okay.
So I think, May, if you're ready to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming today. I hope this was helpful. And like Mikayla said, please reach out if you have further questions.
Oh,
Uh,
so sorry,
oh,
um, we've got one more question that
yeah.
just came in. Is there a particular recommendation for the session intervals, like once a week or every 2 weeks?
Not a specific recommendation. It's whatever really works for you. Um, and it can also be in short term, it's a little bit harder, maybe. To sort of flip between. But in long term, usually there's some flexibility. Like if you want to start with weekly sessions and then sort of wean yourself down to bi-weekly sessions, that's usually really doable and sometimes really helpful, especially when you're coming to the end of your time in therapy. But it really is whatever works for you. And if you try one and it's like kind of just not working, you can also flip to something else. Usually I would say, you're not asking this, but I'll just say it anyway. Sometimes people want sort of monthly sessions, and I will say that that can be really hard especially in a new therapeutic relationship. Like if you've known your therapist forever and that's just sort of what you want, you sort of need a monthly top up, totally cool. But it's really hard to sort of have continuity and like a consistent narrative between sessions if you're sort of starting off with monthly sessions. So I will say like weekly or bi-weekly, whatever works for you.
Okay. Hopefully now we've covered everything. Um, like I said, oh, okay, no, we're good. Um, like I said to everyone, feel free to reach out to us after. Um, if you have any questions, and either myself or May will hopefully get those emails and be able to respond. Um, yeah, so now I guess, May, you can actually wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to wrap up. This is
Mhm,
us, May and
mhm,
Michaela. Thank you so much for coming or watching if you're watching in the future. Hi from the past.
mhm.
I've included just our phone number, which you probably have. That'll take you to the front desk, Michaela, which is also confusing because that's a different person than Michaela, FYI.
Yes.
And our just general Heartwood Healing Center email if you just have general inquiries. If you have had an engagement session, you probably already know Michaela. If you haven't, now you have an introduction. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great day and I hope this was really helpful for everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And we hope we get to connect with all of you soon.